it's only right that we finish out our grading for the 2024 season here on PHLY Phillies podcast, as we've been bringing you grades for every individual player. We've been going to the coaching staff, and nobody's above it, front office included. So let's get into our final grade. Before we talk Juan Soto in day 6 of our Juan Soto sweepstakes, before we talk about all the other rumors of who's looking to make trades, free agency, different things going on around the league, let's just first finish up our final grade of the 2024 season with Dave Dombrowski. This is an interesting one.
Yeah, because the offseason moves from last year count.
They do. You
know, Rodolfo Castro's big season he gets credit for. Rodolfo Castro, he didn't have an impact.
So Dave Dombrowski is one that I actually hold with a very, 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 very high expectation because it is your job, quite literally, to bring in roster moves and bring in players that are going to help win a World Series. This team had the core, they had the ability, they had the veterans, they had the experience. I mean, you talk about a group that went to the World Series in 2022, the NLCS in 2023. So you can't say they're not ready for the playoffs. No, they've been ready for the playoffs. They've already had, they've had a chance to dip their toes in, and they dipped more than just a toe in with that run to the World Series. So when you look at Dave Dombrowski's inability to bring in pieces that can help them take that next step, the trade deadline jumps out at you. But of course, it wasn't just that. It was last offseason. It was a trade deadline. So in terms of the trade deadline acquisitions, you had a Carlos Estevez, who we like as a person. We like Mr. Kamehameha. He was best of the options that we brought in. Tanner Banks was just there, a blender, didn't do much, didn't kill you, didn't help you. And then, of course, we know Austin Hayes, although we can't control a kidney infection, in terms of his at-bats and production, never panned out to be a guy that you had hope for. You know, he was an everyday, then he was a platoon, then he was, I don't really know, question mark. So I know for me, I'm actually going to give, and I also want to keep in mind the fact that Dave Dombrowski has not been in charge of one or two, but multiple teams that have made it to the World Series. He's been around for the 97 Marlins, the 06 and 2012 Tigers, 2018 Red Sox, of course, 2022 Phillies. He knows what it takes to get to that point, yet you did not help the Phillies get to that point. And when you look at the other moves that were made, the Tommy Edmonds, the Lane Thomases, the Tanner Scotts that teams made in the trade deadline period that actually helped them come postseason time, for me, it was a C-, and I actually could be talking to a D+.
Yeah. So, part of this was looking at the offseason that they had, and the trade deadline is obviously the big cherry on top. I'm going C+. I don't think you're very off with the C-. I could be talked into lower. Austin Hayes, you can excuse make all you like. That was a failure of a trade deadline move. Of course, you can't predict injuries and kidney infections.
No.
But I don't know. We have to grade you based on the moves that happened. Austin Hayes was a disaster. Carlos Estevez, he was okay. Did he really improve the Phillies that much? Maybe he allowed guys to slot into more natural spots in the bullpen, but I don't know, very uninspiring. The Aaron Nola extension in the offseason, that was fine. That gives you a nice little plus from maybe up to a C+ from a C-, but overall just weak. And I think the desperation was there. Maybe a C- is actually more fair because of the age of this core. You probably should have had a little bit more a sense of push all in and go for it. So, I'll go C-. Screw it. C+.
Wow.
Seems a little too fluffy. I'll go C-. Tyler, what do you got?
Yeah, it was a pretty average season, I think, for a team that had more than average aspirations. We talked about it at the trade deadline, and we had some pretty varying grades at the end of the trade deadline, and some were really positive and some were really negative. And I thought that the trade deadline was super, super average for Dave Dombrowski.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that was because I think, whoa, hold on. There we go.
There
it is.
Hey,
I think that the reason was because I thought the Estevez move was a good one. They needed a back end of the bullpen type of guy, somebody with closer experience. I didn't know necessarily if he was going to be the de facto closer or not, and they intended to use him in that
kind
role.
of just gave him the job, right?
And that's fine either way. I thought it was a good move. You needed another arm in the bullpen. I think all good teams need another arm in the bullpen, but you got a pretty high leverage one. And I thought, you gave up two starters who may, if both pan out, are going to be, decent middle to back end of the rotation type of guys. Aldegari made his debut with the Angels, and that's probably a product of the Angels being desperate more than Aldegari being ready for the major leagues. But I thought it was a good move for the Phillies to go get a guy that they really could rely upon. He was solid. I don't think he was sensational. I don't think he was awful. I think he was decent in his time with the Phillies, and the postseason grand slam hurts the ERA quite a bit, obviously. But the rest of the moves were either looking ahead, which could prove to be a decent move with a Moises Chase type of player. Maybe Seth Johnson gives you something in 25. But bringing in Austin Hayes doesn't really excite anybody. It didn't excite me at the time, and I don't think it excited anybody then because, the book was out on Austin Hayes where he was basically the inverse split Brandon Marsh, where he can hit left-handed pitching, but he can't hit right-handed pitching. Yeah. And if Marsh was the guy that could hit right-handed pitching but couldn't hit left-handed pitching, you basically have two guys to play one position, and it's the two quarterback theory. When you have two, you really have none. So you didn't have a starting left fielder last year. It was an uninspiring trade deadline for Dombrowski. A great job of locking up Christopher Sanchez for a very, very team-friendly deal.
Really good move.
And their team is in a spot right now where they don't really have to worry about too many free agents leaving. It's Hoffman and Estevez are really your only two that you're talking about. Everybody else is either under team control or has a big contract extension already. It was an average year for Dave Dombrowski where the aspirations were higher. I give him a C, and we'll see what happens this offseason. This is a very, very important offseason for Dave Dombrowski in the front office.
This is probably going to paint the whole picture of him. Like this offseason and how creative they get and how aggressive they get. And is he able to, get John Middleton to write another check? Like this is going to probably paint the whole picture because that, championship window is still open, but it's certainly getting smaller.